small little things is what makes us different from each other.
Mm,
There's room at the table for all of
for
us.
sure.
There's such a demand for teeth whitening, but adding those small things throughout the appointment with your client is what's going to make you different. For example,
Before diving into this week's show, let's thank our sponsor, Fern Whitening Supplies. Okay, friend, do you need a reason to try Fern's whitening gels? Let's chat. Fern's gels are vegan, gluten-free, kosher, and cruelty-free. Those are the buzzwords that your patients are going to be looking for, but what about the actual chemical breakdown? These whitening gels are a quality blend of hydrogen and carbamide peroxide, followed by no fluoride, plus sensitivity free. Friend, this is the whitening gel of your dream, available in chairside and take-home strengths. Now, let's get on with the show. Happy Whitening Wednesday. Today is episode 22, and today on the show we have Katie. Katie is a fellow dental professional who is the business owner of Salt City Whitening, and not only is a business owner of her own business, but also helps guide and educate fellow teeth whitening technicians into the legalities of starting teeth whitening. As well, Katie also has a really interesting full-time job with a company called Pearl, which she's going to dive into. This is going to be a fun one. So, Katie, you're a fellow dental professional. I believe you had mentioned a hygienist, correct?
correct, yes.
So, tell us before we dive into the whole story, but how did you leave the op? Why did you leave the op?
Oh, man, this is my favorite question. I loved my patients so much, but as we all know, as RDHs, really any dental professional, we have to go through so much schooling and hard work day in and day out. And I just really thought to myself, man, I work hard. I really worked hard in school. And is this as high as I'm going to go? I'm a hygienist, and then that's kind of it, right? At least in my opinion. And I guess at that point in time, I didn't realize how many branches there were from
Mm.
dental hygiene and clinical dental hygiene until I got into this space. And I'm like, wow, there's a whole slew of things that hygienists and dental professionals could do. And so I just felt kind of limited in clinical dentistry. I knew that I liked those relationships with patients and communicating with doctors, but I really needed that growth, that progression, somewhere to put my passion and my drive. And I knew that was going to be outside of the operatory.
So I love that you mentioned that because it's so true, especially in school. Like they'll focus on chair side and like, okay, if you don't want to be in GP, well, the next best thing is a specialty. But then what else are you gonna do?
It's so true. And man, I got into this space. So I'm a customer success manager. And there's so many things. There's insurance, there's technology, there is consulting. It's a whole world that really the door hasn't been opened. So I hope to be the person to tell more about that.
That's so great. Now, so what happened? Did you just start looking for something that
I
wasn't in an
did.
office?
I did. Yes. And it took a minute because you think about it, and our resumes are extremely specialized. And for companies that maybe they're in dentistry, but they don't understand clinical dentistry, they just see our resume as doing cleanings, taking x-rays, sending the patient out the door, when we all know it's not that. There's selling, there's building relationships, there's financials, there's training. And so it took me almost I think 5 to 6 months to finally find a job. And what stood out on my resume that I think helped me land this job was my journey with teeth whitening. So I'm very, very grateful for teeth whitening.
So did you find that when you interviewed, they were really intrigued that you were your own business owner and that you were dealing obviously upfront with customer service as well as, well, the list of a business owner goes on and on, so many things, but
Yes.
you really found that that helped you stand out for sure?
Absolutely. So, what it showed to them was that I had the drive and determination to start something like my own business. It showed that I knew how processes worked. So, I had many processes put in place for my own business to make sure
Mhm.
that things were running smoothly, that clients were happy. So, that was easy to transfer into a CSM role. They also really liked that I was fighting these legalities, that I was passionate about it, and knew that that would also transfer well. So if I had just had dental hygiene and not my teeth whitening with those aspects on it, I think I would have gotten lost in the shuffle.
That really helped you stand out.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and ironically, I found the job because somebody posted on LinkedIn. I'd been applying everywhere, and somebody liked a post on LinkedIn and it said, "Are there any dental hygienists looking to get into the tech space?" And I was like, "Me, please choose me."
So
And the rest is history.
take a moment and tell us about Pearl because it's like one of a kind company. Like, what is going on with it? Like, what is it?
Yes. Yes. So Pearl is using artificial intelligence to go through your patient's x rays in real time and give you a second set of eyes. I like to compare it to a digital assistant, but Pearl has FDA clearances on certain pathologies. So it's going to go through your patient's images and highlight things like cavities, periapical radiolucencies, so infections,
Mhm.
calculus, bone loss, and it puts it all into color so that your patient can understand. They've been using AI in medicine for years and years and years, most notably COVID. If you went to the doctor and you had a chest x ray, they would then use AI to
Mhm.
analyze your chest x ray. The only difference here between medicine and dentistry is we are the first to use AI patient facing. So we're not going to be using it in this dark radiologist office somewhere that no one will ever see. We're now using it chairside. We don't have to talk in shades of gray. Our patients are not going to say, "Hey, this looks like a bunch of toes to me." They can see it in color. They're going to walk away with a better understanding of their oral health. So Pearl is just using AI to go through those images and look at the varying shades of gray and alert you to areas of interest.
That is incredible. So, how young is this company?
Yeah, that's a great question. So they really brought the product to market in 2019. So it's
Wow,
relatively new. I'm technically in a startup.
that is so neat. And what are you finding? Are you really American based right now, or have you kind of spread out?
Yes, so Pearl is actually international. We're one of the only
Wow.
AI companies over in Europe. So we have a team in London, we've got a team in Argentina, and then we also have us here in the US. It's very different from dental hygiene because I am fully remote, work from home. And
So
I'm
neat,
sure all of my dental professionals out there are like, "Katie, that's the dream." And it is amazing. Don't get me wrong.
right?
But I think you'd be shocked how much us as people persons miss interacting with people. I really miss going out and like seeing humans, seeing the sun sometimes.
Right. Working from home is such a catch 22. Definitely perks, but then there are some things that you're like, oh man. But that is so wild. So, this is something that I can imagine is also really easy to integrate since, I mean, what office really hasn't already gone digital, right? So,
Yeah.
smart.
I truly think AI, and when we think of the timeline of dentistry, right? We've got
Mm,
powered toothbrushes, digital dentistry, digital x-rays. And I think AI is going to land on that list because it's been so popular in medicine. And using the AI as a tool to streamline our workflows and help with patient education, empower us as dental professionals to start having these conversations. If the AI points it out, that's
yeah.
an easier segue for me to talk to my patient. And so I truly believe that it's going to become the norm in dentistry probably in the next 5 years.
And your office, well, your company that you're working with is definitely going to lead the charge 100%.
Yeah, they're a great company. I'm so fortunate to work for them. I feel really, really lucky.
So good. So tell us, you're in the op. Let's go back to the
Mhm.
op.
Yeah.
What made you start teeth whitening? Were your patients asking for it? Were you just like, did your office even offer chairside whitening at the time? Like, what sparked teeth whitening?
Yeah. Okay. So I was a practicing hygienist, of course, and there's a Facebook group, and somebody had posted, "Hey, can we own teeth whitening businesses as RDHs?" And then I was reading the comments, and everyone's like, "No, you can't because we hold a license. You can't do this." And I commented, and I was like, "Where does it say that?" And then it was crickets. There was no response. So I'm like, does anybody have this in writing? Like, where did this start? Who started this rumor? And so I'm like, you know what? I think I'll get to the bottom of this so that I can start answering these questions if people ask. So I have a family friend who's a lawyer, and I reviewed our practice act, and he looked through it as well, and he's like, it says laser teeth whitening, and we're not using lasers. We're just using lights.
Which is very important to note.
And so, of course, when I'm consulting with people, I'm like, do not say the word laser. Please don't, because that is dentistry. So we're not using a light. And so I took that and I was like, we're not using lasers. It's just an LED light that makes the oxygenation. I can't talk. You guys know the process, speeds up the process, but we never touch a laser. And he's like, you should be good. I'm like, great. Some time goes by and I get a call from Doppel, the Division of Professional Licensing. And I thought that was my phone call to go to dental jail. It was actually my dear, now good friend, Kathy Harris. And she's on the Doppel board here in Utah. And she's like, I caught wind of you looking up legalities for teeth whitening. Can you tell me more about that? So I told her everything I learned. And she's like, you know what, Katie, I think you really have something here. And you're right. It is a really common misconception that it's illegal here in Utah. So from there, Kathy and I decided to team up, and we host webinars and we talk about legalities and what we have found in Utah. And we eventually were in front of the Doppel board and asked the Doppel board, is this illegal? And they're like, well, no. I'm like, okay, great. So then after that, now we just have these webinars and we tell all the hygienists about it. But what I really like and what sparked me was I would see these before and afters on Instagram of non-dental professionals. And these poor clients would have calculus, gum disease,
Mhm.
and I don't blame these people because they don't have a trained eye like
You
we
don't
do.
know
And
what you
that's
don't know,
okay.
right?
Yeah, they just don't know. And I'm like, but it's so much better for the public if they're seeing a dental professional. So that's also what sparked my interest was I wanted to give the public the best care that they could get from a dental professional.
Yeah, that's quite the journey. So, what is your Department of Professional Licensing? So,
Mm-hmm.
here in Canada, we
Mm-hmm.
have like if you are a dental professional, you're part of whatever licensing body you're part of. If you're an
Mm-hmm.
RDH, an RDA, the dentist, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So when you do teeth whitening outside of the office, you step outside of the dental world and you fall into what we call the public health space, so the personal care setting.
Mm-hmm.
And that falls under like pretty much any esthetician service or tattooing,
Yep.
microblading, etc. Think of those services that don't have licensing bodies, so then public
Mm-hmm.
health is in charge of the health and safety of the public.
Yep.
So here in Canada, it's like when you're doing teeth whitening, it's a cosmetic act. As long as you're not using lasers or fluorinated products, you're
Yep.
considered using cosmetics.
Yep.
So we have never run into like a licensing board here because we fall under that area when you step outside of the office. So are you saying in Utah, you as a dental professional hold a license, but then is this licensing body for your dental professional licensing, or is it a different sort of license? Like, are your public health sectors licensed as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. I should have clarified more on that. So The Division of Professional Licensing, they hold our dental license.
Mm.
And the rumor was that since we hold a license, and if we did teeth whitening outside of the dental practice, it was considered practicing dentistry.
Okay, that makes
So,
sense.
yeah, so if anybody were to complain about us, it would go to Doppel,
Mm.
the Division of
Okay.
Professional Licensing. However, when I approached Doppel, similar to what you were saying in Canada, I was like, this is a cosmetic service.
Mhm.
We're using a cosmetic grade hydrogen peroxide. It's also not permanent. And that's a big thing in here in the States, is that it's not permanent work.
For sure.
So they do encompass most of that. We don't necessarily, because Doppel will handle hairstylists, nail
Okay.
artists. They all have licenses as well.
They do. Okay.
But solely because ours was a dental license, people were saying you're practicing dentistry. And the American, I shouldn't say American, the Utah Dental Hygienists Association came out with a statement after all of this and said, yes, you can do teeth whitening. However, it may be confusing to the public on whether they're visiting a dental office or just you as a business. So be sure that you're clear, that patients know they're just coming for teeth whitening and you're an RDH or an RDA, just not in that space. So when I'm consulting with a lot of people, we go over their consent forms
Mm.
and we make sure that that's all included in their consent form.
So it's really making the full on difference that
Mm-hmm.
this is what you're here for. This is what
Yep.
you're not getting. Like
Yes.
completely
Yep.
different cosmetic
Yep.
teeth whitening.
Yep. Not here for cleaning, here to get your teeth whitening, nothing else. But what's
Now,
great too is you can take this, and we'll probably dive into this, but what I really liked is the referrals that us hygienists can give. So I always do a quick overview of my clients. If they have cavities, gum disease, bam, I'm sending them out for a referral and saying, come back and see me once we've got this taken care of. And like I mentioned earlier with Instagram, how you see those before and afters, they don't know to do that.
for sure.
So sometimes dentists get a little funny about competition, I think. But I always approach and I'm like, I will actually help you. I will send people to you. So,
Yeah. That's great. Like here, we have great connections with local dentists.
mhm.
Are you finding that that's how you ended up too with your business? Was once you really did start referring back or recommending if someone is looking for a new dentist, etc. Is
Mhm.
that how you built some good client base too? Was working with your dental
Yeah.
community with them, not against them?
Absolutely. This was actually probably one of my favorite sectors that I tapped into because nobody had really done it yet. And it really came up when I was finding how competitive these dentists were feeling, hearing that we were starting our own teeth whitening business.
Mhm.
The way that I did it though is I approached my dentist because he was not doing any sort of teeth whitening in the practice. You have to think the overhead to buy all the whitening supplies and to use those supplies before they
Yeah.
expire, holding up a chair to do whitening, getting an assistant or a hygienist to apply the whitening, it is extremely expensive for them. The overhead is high. So I approached my doctor and I said, hey, I will buy all of the product. I will come in on a Saturday when you're closed to see clients. I will do the whole service and I'll just give you a small percentage of that. It'll be like my rent renting the chair. And we were so busy. I was so busy. And the doctor had this passive income of me doing teeth whitening. And my benefit was that I got to get into his patient base.
Mhm.
So then I took that and I'm like, I could do this for a lot of dentists and approached dentists. And I said, if you don't have teeth whitening, let me do it. This is going to unload a huge burden, but you're still going to see that income and you'll know that your patients are being taken care of by a dental professional like yourself. So I always encourage hygienists, assistants, whoever have their whitening business to approach doctors. That is
Mhm.
so many patients that you could see and build a clientele off of. And then the doctor's going to be happy because you're benefiting them as well and not working against them.
1,000%. And we actually have tapped into that market here and we do that as well. And it is, I mean, like, it's just, that day is going to be full because
Mhm.
I also find that there is just something about it being in a dental office. The patients don't even second guess it.
Yep.
They're like, take my money. And
Yep.
you're like,
Yep.
okay. But
Yes.
there definitely is lots of pros to being in an office.
Mhm.
So yes, dental professionals, those of you who are listening, definitely tap into your fellow professional market. There are 100% going to be some that are not going to like the idea or help you, but there definitely are going to be some amazing dentists who do want to work with you.
Yes. And I don't know about Canada, but we use a lot of Ultradent products
Okay.
and I love them. The results are amazing. However, it's strong. It's very strong. It's 35% hydrogen peroxide. And I was finding that a lot of my patients were getting sensitive after because it was so strong. So I
Yeah.
love this cosmetic grade because we're getting those results and they're not sensitive. And if we do that in the dental practice, they're going to think the dentist has this great product, right? They're the ones who get the perks from that. So couldn't agree more.
Right? I was going to ask you that. We actually had another fellow dental professional on this show a couple weeks ago,
Mhm.
and she as well was using more of a beauty grade. So I'm assuming we're talking around like that 16 to 18%
Mhm.
level.
Yep.
And I always find it so interesting when fellow dental professionals do choose to use those lower grades.
Mhm.
Definitely agree. Anything over 30% can cause enamel stripping, dehydration. It's more of a false white more than anything.
Mhm.
But so if you're using more of the beauty professional strength, are you applying a gum barrier? Is that also something that if you are or not doing a perk or a reason why you are also using that percentage?
Yeah, I do not use a typical gum barrier with the curing light. I use a vitamin E oil on the gums. I am using a 20% hydrogen peroxide though,
Okay.
so it's strong. And if I get it on their gums, it will turn them white. It will hurt them. So you have to avoid their gums, but I'm only using a vitamin E oil. I think the reason for that is I've found a lot of success just from the oil. And I think it's a little bit more comfortable for the patient to not have that barrier on. They can sit up and rinse in between sessions. They can take the mouthpiece out without stripping off that barrier. Also, applying that barrier can be a little time consuming. So I use vitamin E oil.
Time consuming for sure.
Mhm. But great. I love that it keeps the gums safe.
Right? Definitely pros and cons to both. And I feel like it's one of those things where you just have to get used to a technique that you personally like, right? Like a technique that I personally like might not be a way that you personally like it, right? And there's no wrong way to do it as long as your patient's safe and you're getting them real healthy results, then, you know, the little extra steps each to
Mhm.
their own. And I always like to mention this that regardless of what training you take or what manufacturer's instructions you read, you almost have to be your own wizard because, yes, follow the basics, but there's extra little tweaks that you can do, either remove something or add something that can make the service even better. So never be afraid to experiment too, right?
Mhm. And I think those small little things is what makes us different from each other.
Mm,
There's room at the table for all of
for
us.
sure.
There's such a demand for teeth whitening, but adding those small things throughout the appointment with your client is what's going to make you different. For example,
Yeah.
I always put on a lavender eye mask or I'll put on little iPads for them, you know? So doing these small things that aren't included in things like the manufacturer's booklet will definitely make you stand out.
That's so fun, like getting those. And plus, those things are probably so low cost. And plus, we
Mhm.
know margins are so healthy in whitening that adding those extra little perks, they are not going to break the bank, right?
No, no, nope. And I always give them a little chapstick, you know, it's just like small things. And the nice thing as business owners is we can adjust our pricing as we see fit. So if I'm giving more products throughout the service, maybe I'll raise my prices. And that's the beauty of being a business owner.
Right? You get to make the decision.
Hmm.
So, if you could go back in time and tell old Katie what it was going to be like to start teeth whitening,
Oh,
what
wow.
would be a tip that you would want Katie to know and also that you are passing off to future and fellow teeth whitening technicians?
Yes. Okay. I would definitely give myself the tip to question everything and don't feel bad to push back.
Mm.
I was told no time and time again, or barriers were in front of me. And if I knew, hey, if you just question it, or if somebody tells you no, ask them why it's no. Don't take no for an answer. I think will be very beneficial because then you can get really down to the legalities. Somebody tells you it's illegal, ask them where it says that. What section of the Practice Act or whatever you guys have in Canada does it say that? And don't be afraid to ask these questions so that we can start setting a standard in teeth whitening and that there's no gray area or questionable things. The more we work together and find out these answers, the more healthy and successful our businesses will thrive.
It is so true. And I love that you mentioned that because, especially in the States, there's a lot of noise of, especially, I love that you mentioned like Facebook groups, etc., because there is a lot of noise of someone asking a question and then the thread just being like, no, 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 no. And it's like, where are you getting this information?
Mm-hmm.
You can't just listen to the echo chamber. But then on the flip side, you can't come to, say, a professional like yourself and ask for, okay, what are the yes and no's and a step by step. Depending on where you are, it is going to be slightly different, but you do have to be your own advocate.
Mm-hmm.
Teeth
Mm-hmm.
whitening, you unfortunately can't just go to a website and be like, oh, I just need to do this and this.
Yep.
It's going to vary and
Mm-hmm.
it's frustrating for sure, but it definitely shouldn't hold you back. You just have to be ready to really do your own research. And also, like you mentioned, be your own advocate, be your own biggest supporter because no one else is going to.
No, no. And the more we ask these questions, the easier it's going to become for everybody. Once we have answers like this, if somebody says, hey, is this legal in my state? Hopefully somebody can come in and say, hey, I did the research. Here's what I found. And they can collaborate and we can start building these little nests across the world about teeth whitening legalities.
So true, so true. Well, Katie, this has been so fun and so helpful. I know our listeners are going to love all the info you have helped us with today. So, for listeners that want to follow along, or listeners that maybe have already started whitening, or maybe they haven't quite yet, where can they get in contact with you? Because maybe they do want to chat about your consulting services, etc. Where can we follow and learn more?
Yeah, I am happy to help with anything legality wise, talking about careers outside of the operatory. So feel free to reach out to me. I love talking about this topic. So I'm happy to help. You can find me on Instagram at Salt City Whitening. And you can also reach me at Katie, Katie, at hellopearl.com.
Amazing. So good. All right. Well, Katie, this has been amazing. And
Yes.
listeners, thank you so much for listening to another episode of Whitening Wednesday. We'll be back again next week.